I poured a fortune into presents for my sister's children, but their mother accused me of being stingy for not splurging even more. That's when I chose to shatter their world permanently. Now they're pleading with me to quit. From my earliest days, my folks drilled into me that as an adult, I had to support them. So my ambition to earn big bucks was always tied to the idea of lavishing my relatives with treats and affection. I worked diligently in class, covered more than half the rent during my teen years, but I never received even a sincere appreciation from my parents. At my core, I suspect I realized something was off. Yet I yearned for their validation so intensely, I buried it deep inside. Jump ahead to the present. I'm 28, and as last Thanksgiving approached, I was genuinely optimistic. For the first time in several years, I could afford gifts for the whole group. My mom and dad, my sibling Emily, her spouse Jack, and their trio of youngsters. I even picked up duplicates of items so the little ones wouldn't argue over shares, along with extras for any surprise guests. I persuaded myself that this was the ideal way things should be. But then the shock hit. I arrived at my folks' place with packages crammed in my vehicle, and when I rapped on the door, my mother opened it. I anticipated some embrace, or at least a basic greeting would suffice. Instead, she struck me with, "We believe it's wiser if you skip this year's event." I truly thought she was joking, and I began to laugh lightly. But then Emily yelled from the den, "This isn't an occasion for misers, you've turned into a real downer recently." I stood there stunned. My father lingered in the shadows, mute. Mom appeared as if she wished the ground would engulf her. And Emily, she seemed utterly satisfied. I gazed at her emptily as my system cycled through every feeling. Bewilderment, fury, shame, the works. But I merely nodded gradually and stated, "Okay, if that's the consensus," before pivoting and heading to my car solo, encircled by a heap of rejected offerings. They labeled me a miser, a downer. Where did this originate? A terrible instinct overcame me, and I had this persistent suspicion that Emily orchestrated it all, though I couldn't pinpoint the reason. So I did my usual routine in such scenarios and pondered if I were my own sister's spouse. Would I represent to Emily? Would I value myself? My mind immediately overflowed with recollections of assisting with their children's activity costs, contributing to their holiday savings when funds were scarce, and even funding a portion of their initial payment for their home. This gave me a definite response. Absolutely, I'd cherish myself. It was right then that I permitted myself to become furious, like profoundly furious, sufficient to resolve that this wouldn't conclude there and enough to stride back to their entrance. They remained present, my parents murmuring to one another as if shocked I hadn't simply departed, and Emily lounged on the couch, browsing Instagram with the sound cranked up. I stepped right inside. What's happening? Why am I abruptly excluded? Emily grinned without glancing from her device. "You believe we haven't observed your recent laziness. Even the children realize they've received hardly anything from you lately." Frankly, I'd prefer she had struck me across the cheek instead of spouting that nonsense, and I couldn't resist elevating my tone. "Are you serious? I've got hundreds in value of surprises for your offspring in my vehicle, correct?" But she cut in. I refused to listen. "A couple years back when they arrived, you provided far more. It's truly humiliating." I faced my parents, hoping for some mediation or backing. Instead, Mom offered this uneasy partial grin and remarked, "She makes a valid argument, dear. You recently leased that fresh SUV. You located funds for that." For an instant, I was mute. "The SUV is on payments," I responded, compelling myself to relax. "And even if I bought it outright, how does that abruptly assign me duty for Emily's household? They're not my offspring." "You earn double what Jack makes," Emily interjected once more, reclining as if we were chatting about the forecast. "We're kin. Kin assist one another." I looked at Jack, who sat wordlessly in the nook. "So clarify this," I uttered. "Since I've been lavish previously, I'm now required to continue donating eternally. And if I don't, I'm a miser." Emily lifted her shoulders. "If that's your perspective." Well, that marked my tipping point. I retreated a pace and shook my head. "You know what? You're correct. I don't fit here." I eyed my parents. "Have a nice Thanksgiving." I exited without awaiting a reply. The journey home was strained, my fingers gripping the wheel tightly. I nearly convinced myself I was the antagonist. Like no chance I'm just unexpectedly barred from Thanksgiving. All due to not donating sufficiently? Once home, I lingered in my driveway for ages, merely gazing at the presents I'd spent hours packaging. Because those sacks of surprises now nauseated me. The further I reflected, the sharper it all appeared. It had accumulated over years. Thanksgiving was merely the climax. Emily had consistently relied on me monetarily, When she and Jack initially wed, they battled with finances. Jack switched between positions, and Emily's half-time gig scarcely handled essentials. I intervened to aid, assuming it would be short-term. A few hundred there, a grand here, but short-term evolved into years. But in a sense, it truly was my own doing. I facilitated Emily's dependence too readily, and at some point I created a beast, and that evening was my awakening. I understood I faced a choice. After deliberate consideration, I saw only one answer. No further bailing out Emily and Jack. No additional perpetual surprises to offset their monetary carelessness. I was finished. If they desired their offspring to possess the items I'd supplied, they could sort it out independently. It wasn't simple. Severing ties with my sibling risked harming my bond with her, her offspring, and likely my folks. But I couldn't persist being viewed as a cash machine, rather than a sibling and uncle. I didn't contact anyone, and nobody reached me either. I figured perhaps they understood, but I ought to have anticipated Emily wouldn't release it so readily. The quiet extended past Christmas and New Year's. No rings, no messages, zilch. For the first time ever, I passed the festivities entirely by myself. It wasn't that I anticipated outreach, but it seemed odd when the countdown hit 0 and my device stayed quiet. I admit I contemplated dialing multiple times, but each time I grabbed my phone, I recalled Emily's arrogant expression and her phrase, "occasion for misers." I'd served as their fallback for years, and they dared to handle me like I was expendable. No way. By mid-January, dynamics began altering. Jack had forever been the reserved sort who evaded disputes. But one night, I received a message from him unexpectedly, just wished to express regret over Thanksgiving. I disagree with the occurrence. Emily ignores me, but I felt you ought to hear. I examined my phone for a while, uncertain of a reply. Part of me valued knowing a family member acknowledged the wrongness, but Jack had remained silent that evening, and his remorse now seemed inadequate. I eventually answered, "Appreciate you stating that, Jack, but this isn't dismissible." He didn't pursue further, which suited me. Then, in early February, Emily appeared at my flat without warning. I was amid a virtual meeting when I heard forceful pounding. I attempted disregarding it initially, but it persisted. When I finally responded, there was Emily, appearing disheveled and annoyed. "We must converse," she declared, shoving by me before I could protest. I folded my arms. "What's this regarding?" She didn't delay. "You must cease this immature conduct and resume assisting." I chuckled incredulously. "Assisting? You mean funding your existence? I informed you I'm through with that." She scowled at me. "You're the one with extra cash. Do you comprehend how tough it's become for us since you launched this fit? The children scarcely possess necessities. Jack's battling to maintain it all, but we can't cope without your aid." I couldn't fathom her words. "Are you hearing yourself? You're an adult female, Emily. You possess a spouse and offspring. If you require additional funds, secure superior employment. It's not my duty to fix your issues. You've always assisted prior," she retorted. "Why are you acting so greedy now? Greedy?" I repeated. "You wish to discuss greedy. Let's address how you deceived our folks about me, swayed them against me, and then excluded me from Thanksgiving because I allegedly wasn't lavish enough with your offspring. And now you're here requesting more? That demands real audacity." She began to interject, but I raised my palm. "We're concluded here. I'm not providing another cent, and I don't wish to hear from you until you grasp adult behavior." She remained seething briefly before ultimately charging out. After Emily departed, I assumed that would conclude it temporarily. She'd brood, perhaps gripe to our folks, but eventually comprehend I wasn't yielding. I was mistaken. 2 days on, I received a ring from an unfamiliar digit. I typically ignore those, but intuition urged me to pick up. "Hello, is this Alex?" A lady inquired. "Yes, who's this?" "This is Patricia Wilson. I'm a lawyer. I represent someone who's voiced worries about specific monetary issues concerning your relatives. Do you have time to chat?" I stiffened. "A lawyer? What monetary issues? I can't detail over the line," she proceeded formally. "But it pertains to monetary inputs you've provided to your sibling Emily and her household. Specifically, the application of those inputs. Would you consent to meet at my workplace?" My thoughts whirled with scenarios. Had Emily secured loans using my identity? Was she employing my details for something unlawful? Or was this merely another frantic bid to shame me into donating again? "Who's your client?" I queried warily. There was a short silence. "I'm sorry, I can't reveal that currently, but I guarantee you're not facing a lawsuit. This is more an informative session." Despite my instincts, I accepted the meeting. Curiosity prevailed, and I couldn't dismiss the notion that more was unfolding than just Emily's entitlement. When I entered Patricia Wilson's office the following day, she unleashed a revelation almost instantly. "My client is Jack," she stated, passing a file over her table. I blinked in astonishment. "Jack, why would he require legal counsel?" Patricia observed me attentively. "He thinks Emily has been mishandling the funds you've supplied them through the years. He possesses proof indicating she's been concealing assets from both of you." My gut sank. "Concealing money? What do you imply?" She unveiled the file, displaying bank records, invoices, and captures of messages. "Jack believes Emily has been redirecting your monetary donations into a distinct account. From these logs, she seems to be spending the cash on internet buying binges and covert pamper trips instead of family costs." I examined the papers in disbelief. "You're saying all those instances I aided with expenses and the children's requirements, that cash never reached them?" Patricia affirmed gravely. "That appears accurate. Jack uncovered this lately and approached me since he was uncertain of next steps. He was reluctant to include you at first, but considering recent happenings, he believed you merited awareness." I couldn't accept what I heard. Emily had manipulated me throughout, accepting funds I assumed helped her household and squandering it on herself. I felt enraged, deceived, and utterly foolish for not noticing earlier. "Does Jack have firm evidence?" I questioned tightly. Patricia confirmed and nudged the file nearer. "Examine it personally." I scanned the papers, spotting transfers from my account to their shared one that aligned with periods I'd assisted in crises. Then withdrawals to an isolated account in Emily's name solely. Transactions from that account revealed costly online purchases, wellness escapes, and even a short trip with someone called Jen that Jack evidently knew zilch about. "Incredible," I whispered, shaking my head. "And Jack just learned?" "He only found the separate account lately," Patricia clarified. "He harbored doubts for a while but lacked entry to her private banking data until he inadvertently opened correspondence for her. That's when he reached me. I leaned back, attempting to absorb it all. Does he expect me to act? File charges?" Patricia denied. "Not yet. He's more focused on safeguarding himself and the youngsters, but he desired your knowledge should Emily attempt further manipulation." I chuckled. "Well, she already attempted. She arrived at my home insisting I resume aiding." Patricia nodded insightfully. "That matches what Jack shared. It appears Emily is sensing the strain now that your monetary backing has ceased. She might be in greater difficulty than Jack comprehends." I gazed at the file, my ideas swirling. Part of me desired to challenge Emily right away, but another knew that would only fulfill her craving for drama. Instead, I inquired, "What's Jack intending to do?" Patricia paused before responding. "He's evaluating choices. He aims to guarantee he and the children are secure, both economically and beyond. If Emily's actions worsen, he might pursue divorce." That struck me more intensely than anticipated. Jack had always appeared the silent, devoted kind who'd endure with Emily no matter what. If even he contemplated leaving, matters must be graver than I pictured. I phoned Jack that evening. Our talk was uncomfortable initially, but it soon deepened. "I ought to have spoken up that day at your folks," he confessed. "I've never excelled at confronting Emily, but that's no justification." "Why now?" I questioned. "Why reveal the money after so long?" There was an extended silence before he replied. "The children merit superior to this. I merit superior, and frankly, so do you after all you've contributed to us. Whatever you choose next, you have my backing," I informed him. "Thanks," he answered softly, "and I'm genuinely sorry about Thanksgiving. You didn't merit any of that." We conversed longer, and when we ended, I experienced an unforeseen calm. Emily had torched her connection with me, but Jack and the kids, they weren't adversaries, and if he was courageous enough to oppose her, I wouldn't resent him. Yet I couldn't dispel the sense that Emily wasn't finished stirring chaos. A few weeks on, I got a message from Jack. "We're departing this weekend." I rang him instantly, and he described that he and the kids were relocating to his folks' home in a different state, while Emily was away with a pal, which I now doubted was slang for another buying binge. He was gathering their vital items and taking the children. He didn't want Emily aware of their destination until he had legal safeguards. "I just can't continue feigning normalcy," he said softly. "The kids perceive more than we assume. What about relocation costs and settling in?" I asked, truly worried for their welfare. There was a hesitation before he hesitantly stated, "I hoped you could assist with that just till my initial salary at the new position." I despise requesting after all. "No need to continue," I cut in. "I've got it handled, just specify what you require." I wound up aiding Jack and the kids in moving, but for the first time in ages, it didn't seem like exploitation. It seemed like I was at last backing something constructive. Emily, as expected, erupted when she came back to discover them absent. She rang me yelling that I'd swayed Jack against her and wrecked her household. I allowed her to vent briefly before serenely saying, "Perhaps if you devoted less time to buying and more to being a parent and partner, this wouldn't have occurred, but hey, best wishes." Then I disconnected. Jack is thriving now, he's secured a solid role. The children are adapting to their fresh academy, and he's beginning to reclaim his self-assurance. As for Emily, word is she's still faulting everyone except herself. My folks eventually heard the full tale and have expressed deep remorse for siding with Emily at Thanksgiving. But truthfully, I'm simply relieved to be liberated from the burden. Some kin ties are valuable to preserve, others merely exhaust you until you're empty.